on the URL youtube.com/smooth981fm Lagos. Make sure you leave your comments up on that live chat. All right, joining me in the studio today, I have got Lakunle. Good morning.
Morning, Shopway. Today is not Wednesday.
Did I say Wednesday? Oh my god, I'm having that.
No,
Oh wait,
no,
no.
you didn't say that.
Oh right, it's because you're here on a. Oh, that's
I'm
true.
here on a
You're here on a
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah. Good morning, Lagos.
And joining us, we've got a new voice on Freshly Pressed. Chibuzo, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Shopper. Good morning, Lagos.
Yes,
It's nice to be here for the
great
first
to
time.
have you here
Thank
for the
you.
first time. Looking forward to the start of a beautiful relationship, people. All right, so let's get into our stories. And I know you're going to want to send messages about this first one because we have another report from Reuters. From the Punch newspaper, Reuters releases fresh reports accuses army of a massacre. A report that the federal government has described as fake news. In this, the news agency published a fresh report yesterday on Monday, in which it accused the Nigerian army of carrying out a massacre of children during the ongoing war against terrorism. So, in its first report, though, it released last Wednesday, accused the army of running a secret abortion program on female victims of terrorists, saying that no fewer than 10,000 pregnancies had been terminated since at least 2013. Then we got this new report that I saw yesterday, Lakunle, and I, okay, so first of all, it's quite interesting that we've had so much of a focus on Nigeria and the Nigerian army from Reuters, but now what to make of these fresh allegations?
Okay, so quickly before we speak to this, I just like to say a few things, maybe two, three sentences. One, for all those of us who think that war is the answer to every problem, these are one of the consequences of war, right? In war, you do not know who you're shooting at or who you're killing, and collateral damages that happen. These are examples of it that we're seeing now. Okay. Then two, the word massacre may not ordinarily mean 10,000, 100,000, 200,000 people. It could even be only one person. It also describes the viciousness or the how wickedly the killing or the killing or the death of that individual was done. Okay, so having said that, this story is actually very damning to the people of Nigeria. If you look at the consequences of this everywhere else, right? Um, the first story, the chief of defense staff um, denied it 2 or 3 days ago that it never happened, only for this second one to also come out yesterday that children were deliberately killed, right? And the
Not
minister has
just
said,
deliberately killed, smothered, poisoned, and shot.
yeah,
That is actually
that okay.
the name of the headline of this
Okay, so
investigation.
that description already speaks to a massacre because it was deliberately done, poisoned, smothered. That means probably they were suffocated, and it was done deliberately. Okay, so if that story is true, then I think that there are some form of um, deep investigation should happen to be commissioned by the commander in chief and look at what is happening in that place. Because okay, so if we are supposed to have saved these people from the insurgents, so is that the next thing? What condition? Even in a war situation, there's always this thing about women, children, and elderly people not to be harmed for whatever reason. So why would anybody, for the life of me, think that okay, so um the next thing to do, even if the father or the mother is the person you are chasing, and then they disappeared and you find the child is not supposed to be answerable to the sins of his father, his older brother that you are chasing or whatever. But we find this even in peaceful times that somebody commits a crime, the police goes to his house, they don't find him, they take his wife and children. So even in peaceful times when we do this kind of thing, so you can imagine the kind of mentality that people carry into this kind of situations. It's it is so damning that I hope and I pray that this story is not true and that we can prove to the world. And also speaking to it that the original mistrust would be that we will not trust our government to say that it is not true, because government itself has not acted in a way to earn our trust as a people.
So, luckily, couple of things. So the first one is the first report in and of itself, with regards to the over 10,000 forcefully terminated pregnancies. How much of a splash do you think it has made in Nigeria, as opposed to internationally? And how much of a splash do you think this is going to make in Nigeria once more, where where we seem to have a wall dividing us, maybe those in the urban areas who are in relatively peaceful urban areas from those who are at the forefront of things.
I think we're generally detached from death, dying, maiming, and a lot of other negative words that describe this kind of situation. That's why we're this quiet. That's why everything seems normal. So we hear 10,000 people were forced to have an abortion. So that's why we have 10,000 people were forced to have an abortion, and we think it's normal. We hear that so number of children have been deliberately killed now. We think that it's normal. These things are not normal. To kill one person is not normal. But we're so desensitized that now you and I were struggling to buy fuel. Will we worry about somebody who we don't know who's been killed in some 1,000 kilometers away from where we are? So so those are the kind of things that we're talking about. We're unlucky to be in this kind of situation right now, right? But to the international community, where we would go to go and stand up and say we are signatories to this treaty, to that treaty, to that treaty, they look at us as an unserious group of people, as vicious people, and that we can condone those kind of things. And let's be very factual. This, whether true or not, the fact that this story comes out is a dent on our image, and we need to clean it up. We need to prove to the world that it didn't happen, or that if it happened, the people who are responsible will be apprehended and punished.
Well, right now it's just being tarred with fake news and
I pray it is.
mm, mm, yeah, so let me just take, just if you haven't looked at the report, just the first few sentences. More than 40 soldiers and civilians told Reuters or rather the summary, sorry. More than 40 soldiers and civilians told Reuters they witnessed the Nigerian military kill children or saw children's corpses after a military operation. Estimates totaled in the thousands. Now, the investigations, the Reuters investigation was it went into six incidents in which at least 60 died, with one mother describing the deaths of her twin babies. And I quote, the soldiers said they killed those children because they are children of Boko Haram. They even spoke with the soldier who said, let me take this quote, I don't see them as children, I see them as Boko Haram. If I get my hands on them, I won't shoot them, I will slit their throats.
There you go.
That was from a soldier who told Reuters that his best friend was shot dead by insurgents.
There you go.
It'll be interesting to see what your responses are, people. Send your messages in 0809 440 981. All right, this day newspaper now. And Chibuzo, I'll come to you for this one. Federal government takes strident step on plastic waste management. Let's get into the story. So it says the article goes on to say the federal government has taken a strident step on management of plastic waste in the country by inaugurating a project steering committee for promotion of sustainable plastics, value chains through circular economy practices. Going through the story, could you tell me a little bit about where those strident steps are?
So obviously, the first thing that Shoka has spoken to, obviously, that there seems to be a disconnect between the title, the headline, and the contents of what was actually done by the minister. So in speaking about strident steps, I don't see anything that, in looking at the details of what he said at that event, there seems to be nothing strident about it. And that's sad, given the fact that we've had to struggle with outshoots of this kind of issue in the course of the year with our flooding and all that, which can directly be related to things about to issues like our misuse of plastic products and how they fill up our drainage systems and cause flooding and things like that. So what we expected to see or hear from the minister was more about a plan, either a short-term plan, a medium-term plan that had incentives, had benefits, had punishments, had something that would make it sound strident. What we see him talking about is obviously things like circular economy, which basically is about how you use, reuse, recycle, you know, maintaining that. And that news that out there in the air. It talked about reports that have been commissioned by various other governments. What we wanted to see or expected to see was what is the Nigerian government doing about this problem, because this problem is major. One of the things about it, we can talk a lot about it in different circles, but what seems for me as a person, what seems to be lacking to start with is that
Mm-hmm.
there's not enough education around this problem, what the effects of this problem are. And we're not just talking about educating the adults, even the kids. You see the kids who are buying whatever they are buying and throwing it training on the ground. Nobody's disposing of it. Obviously, you're not even if you look past even the education and people's habits or actions, you also look at things like, do we even have disposals? In public spaces, can I have a drink and toss it into the bin without having to carry it around the rest of Lagos? We need to think about those things and put those things into place. We need to educate people a lot more. Then we now need to start enforcing.
So, Chibuzo, quick question. Let me just put some information out there. So, when it comes to issues with regards to banning or severely limiting the use of single-use plastics, Africa is actually ahead of the curve.
Yeah,
We're
Rwanda, I
ahead
know,
of the
right?
curve. Not just around Africa.
Yeah. Okay.
34 out of the I think it's 77 countries that have passed full or partial bans on single-use plastics are in Africa.
Okay.
So yes, you've mentioned Rwanda, but
Kenya.
Botswana, Kenya, Mali, Cameroon, Uganda, Ethiopia, Malawi, Morocco, Tanzania, all of these have very strict policies on the use of single use plastic, with them either being completely banned or the government's levying very, very high taxes on them. Even in Tanzania, people have talked about the fact that when you get to the airports, in fact, not before you get to the airports, when you're on the plane, Tanzania does not allow tourists to bring in plastic bags or plastics of any sort. You have to turn it in at the airport. The only thing that they allow are those Ziploc bags that are used for travel purposes, and only if you take it back with you back to where you came from. Nigeria has a certain big brother role on or is we see ourselves as having a big brother role on the continent. Um, what would you say to are lagging behind. Now, when I say are lagging behind, 3 years ago, the House of Representatives passed a bill banning plastic bags in Nigeria, but it stopped there. We didn't see anything from the Senate. We haven't seen anything so far.
Can
What
I
do you want to see?
can I say something?
Sure, like, go ahead.
So, just like this committee that's been set up, what we see is policies and laws made at the top. It does not, um, you don't get, doesn't get distilled and dovetailed into the people. Okay, so just like every person is worried about struggling and surviving for the day, a plastic bag is probably the least of the worries of people. So that's why all those things end up in those places where they end up.
Here's the thing.
So
I understand you're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs
So-
right
so-
now. In order for us to get to self-actualization, in order for us to be able to think outside of ourselves, we need to be able to sort
Yeah.
out our shelter, our food. I understand all of those. But excuse me, do people in these other countries that are in Africa not have the same issues?
So
Right.
sorry.
So where I wanted to land it is that we need to action those policies and laws. For example, if all the malls will make you pay for the plastic bags that you take out of there, for example, you will think twice before going there. You want to buy 3 items, they give you 6 plastic bags to carry 3 items, and you are paying for 6. If a street, for example, you would the government environmental protection agency, any state at all, will visit a random street and they'll sanction the residents of that street for finding plastic bottles in their drainages. If the law environmental what's it called, we are able to separate our waste in our houses and bag them properly and take them to where they are, if we have recycling plants who will be ready to buy these plastics off us, for example, if you and I will commit to going to our various eateries and go with our own plates and bowls from home for our takeaways rather than go there and collect styrofoams or plastic bowls and all that. Those are the little things that everybody needs to do. Sometimes we don't even need to
I'm
wake
not
up
sure
well
about
from
that
that.
banning resident or finding
I'm
residents.
I'm ju- that's just an extreme of that's just an extreme of the possible things
Have
to
you ever
do.
been to a street after some particular streets after it rains? Collect the plastics from everybody else. Chibuzo.
So I like to speak to what, yeah, and funny enough, Shopper just jumped over. So like early last year, I've done it twice. So I actually had to clean up plastics from the drainage in my street. And after doing it one day, next morning you wake up and you see it from because it's flown from the other streets and it's coming to those drains. So it's if you have to solve this problem, basically it's you have to actually educate people and change the consciousness. And you have to apart from just educating, it's not just enough to just educate, there's carrot and the stick. So that's where we expected to see things about the stringent measures. So when you talk about single-use plastics and encouraging people to use jute bags, use alternates, there are economic opportunities in this thing. So because major 3 years ago when the Senate went that there was a lot of conflict, there was a lot of pushback because they said, oh, it was going to deprive, it was going to affect the plastic industry, which was providing next number of jobs. But down the line, we're looking at it and we're creating jobs today in quote, we're destroying ourselves for tomorrow. But yes, you could also have industries that are doing plastic paper bags, that are doing jute bags in a sustainable fashion. So we need the government also needs to think down long term and have more system thinking. What you see in that entire program was the minister just basically talking about policies and processes. As long as it doesn't get down to the man on the street or even the kid in school, because hey, a lot of us are very formed, but those children are already making mistakes that are going to sink us years down the line because we're not doing enough.
All right, let's go to your messages up on WhatsApp 0809 4440981. You have things to say. Um, this in Dami from Ikorodu says the Nigerian military is a perfect encapsulation of the moral bankruptcy of our society. It was on this very show last week where I heard people justifying forced abortions on minors, where some of these women died. These reports aren't from faraway lands. It is who we are. Know this and know peace. By the way, anyone who says these things are impossible needs a long visit to Yaba Left, says Danny from Ikorodu. Fabian from Ekpe says the government really needs to take action in the matter of the abortion of these children. Unfortunately, I don't have much faith in the investigation because when it comes to past human rights abuses by the military, no one has ever been made to face the law, nor have steps been put in place to prevent a reoccurrence. D from Malausa says it's clear that Reuters is on another agenda. Why now that the military have gained a serious upper hand? Most likely fake or misleading news, in D's opinion. We are not in a war environment and cannot speak to this. It will be misleading and incomprehensible to believe information sourced through terrorists. They source information through soldiers as well. Are the soldiers terrorists? Interesting. The sources, including the soldiers, should be named if credible, says D from Alausa. Dr. I at CMS says the news about the forced abortions and the massacres are terrible. I've been hearing pundits and callers trying to discredit this news offhand. I'm scared that Nigerians are not fazed by the killings. There's something wrong with our society. We need to be more sensitive to victims of violence. One person killed is one person too much. And Jim says, while not justifiable, you can understand the line of reasoning behind both the abortions and the massacres. The children are products of trauma, as are the pregnancies. Hmm, that's an interesting one, Jim. So here's what I'll say to that. If you look well enough and with a magnifying glass, the best kind, you can always find a rationale behind every action. People don't make actions, don't conduct actions with no rationale behind them. However, the whole point of us as a society and the movement forward and the progression that we have as a society is that there are some lines that we do not cross. There are bottom lines we do not go under. There are lines drawn that we should not cross. And if we do cross them and any part of society crosses them, then we need to take a serious look at ourselves and bring ourselves back to the side of progress and humanity. I'm gonna move on now. More messages. Deja vu from Lucky. Oh, this is interesting. Says it's always sad to see a denial of the obvious. No attempt to investigate the Reuters story. Just this denial. Given the existing trust deficit, the Reuters story is the more credible position, and the government should investigate this matter and, where it is true, prosecute anyone found to be responsible for it. B from Lucky says, why is it when the military is making progress that this is coming out? Are they just hearing about these massacres? Is it their way of responding to their earlier goof? There is so much with the police, economy, and politics, etc., that Reuters can report on. They should please leave the military alone to continue their recent good progress. Wow, and your messages do keep coming, and I love that, and I'll be reading more of them. But let's take a look at our next article. This one comes in from This Day newspaper. Actually, sorry, no. I think I've jumped ahead. This one comes in from the Punch. National Assembly says Constitution amendments may fail, and it's the states to blame for that. Luckily,
That statement is near 100% a fact. My reasons: we know the state of the states' houses of assembly today. We know that the governors in each of the states have the assemblies in their pockets, right? So much that, for example, for the past 5 years or thereabout, 5 or 4 years, almost 4 years now, a certain state's assembly has not sat, or rather, in a 24-man state assembly, only 8 people have been sitting. We know a state once where the governor
feel free to name them.
ordered the roof of the state's House of Assembly to be removed because the House of Assembly members were seen to be anti the governor, and so on and so forth. So, if there's anything, any law to be passed in this country, any constitutional amendment to be made, we know that we need two-thirds of the members of each state of assembly in two-thirds of the 36 states to make that amendment in the constitution. And here we are, the National Assembly, the Senate president, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives says that in the last 4 years, they've budgeted 4 billion for constitutional amendment, 1 billion for each year. And so, if such monies has been spent to make those laws that needs the states to concur with what the National Assembly has passed, and nothing has happened, it's a waste of our resources. One, and then somebody should be paying for those things, right? Now, the other side of it is also this: that now, if you make laws that the governors are against, you can be sure that because they have the houses of assembly in their pockets, it's never going to pass through. We can see so many of them. There was one, which law was it, that the Freedom of Information Bill? You have some states today in Nigeria that have said that they are not domesticating it. You have the Child Rights Bill. You have many states in Nigeria today that are refusing to domesticate it. We have the issue of, and the chairman of this event, governor of Kaduna State, says, "Look, go and do law on state policing, go and do law on education, and so on and so forth. If those are the ones that interest us as governors, so the National Assembly also need to do their politics properly, so that they can engage the governors, that they can get the headway in these constitutional amendments they need to do."
All right, let's take a look at our next article now. So this one now comes in from This Day newspaper. Federal government abolishes face masks at airports, relaxes COVID-19 rules. So they've abolished the wearing of face masks by air travelers, aircraft crew, and also canceled the PCR test, irrespective of vaccination status. Chibuzo, it's been a while coming.
So it's hooray for everybody,
And
for everybody who feels uncomfortable wearing those masks on the planes. Those guys who have struggled to move with the changes that came with obviously the pandemic and stuff like that. And obviously there's going to be deep in business for some particular industries that have made a killing from the PCR test before and after flights. So what the government has done is just to tell us, see, we're relaxing the previous rules, mandatory rules we had on people wearing masks in the planes. We're relaxing the rules on tests coming when you're arriving or when you're departing the country, which you had to do mandatorily. And that obviously has its own impact economically, and that has impacts on the comfort of a lot of people. But they've also talked about people who are immunocompromised, the elderly, that they just need to keep up with those actions. Now, while I'm happy on one angle that these things are being relaxed, I have a bit of a concern about how ready are we to manage the outcomes of this, because what has happened in the last year or thereabout is that we've moved from the point where we're extremely conscious about the way we behave and the impact on our health and COVID, to where we actually, there's a lot of carelessness now. We don't care. So, we've taken a lot of things for granted. And that's a bit of a worry for me, because that we're not showing enough concern.
James,
about things.
I would ask you this, considering the fact that we've seen a global kind of consensus in which we've seen different countries and states saying, all right, let's relax these COVID 19 rules and regulations because it looks like the virus is here to stay. We can't keep up with the continuous variants that just like to show their different heads up about the place. Nigeria is actually when we compare ourselves with some other countries, lagging a
Yeah,
little in
we're
the
late on the day.
relaxation.
Yeah, we're late on the day to
Even
that.
China has finally relaxed their
Yeah.
zero COVID policy. So it's Nigeria and China now.
No, no, China has been stripping down the last few weeks. They've actually been stripping down all the infrastructure around zero build zero policy.
Because of widespread protests. But back to Nigeria, wherein people actually talked about the fact that we haven't relaxed these restrictions, especially with emphasis on the PCR test, saying that it felt more like a revenue generation scheme than anything else.
Exactly. So myself and Luckily had this discussion downstairs about. I recall particularly I was talking about one or two enterprises. They were talking about palliative premises in choice areas which had been vacant prior to the pandemic, and had been taken over by particular organizations to do their tests. And
Mm-hmm.
even within the country, we had issues where there were disparities in the pricing of the tests in Lagos, for instance, versus what you could get in Abuja. And we were asking the reason why was it more expensive in Lagos and less expensive in Abuja. And I've had all sorts of stories and thoughts. So on one side, obviously, that's one of the things. It increased the cost of traveling. So and that obviously has a direct impact on things like tourism,
Mm-hmm.
moving around. You're going to fly and you wanted to go on vacation. You're going to add your flight ticket to the cost of having to do multiple tests wherever you are and back in the country. And the entire management of that entire process obviously became an unnecessary overhead for a lot of people. So yes, we're moving with the global trends, but we also need to watch out and make sure that we're always prepared, because the truth is that COVID, well, I'm a bit of a science person and junkie. COVID is just looks like one of those first things that we might have to deal with going forward in health challenges. And we need to get to the point where we can respond adequately to that. Thankfully for us, we did that a bit with Ebola. We've done that with COVID, so it looks good. But at times I worry that we've gotten around it by chance instead of by plan and by design.
That's quite interesting because if you look at Africa and the African response to COVID and preparedness, we had a bit of a head start to some of the other countries because we were dealing with Ebola, a hemorrhagic fever that the world did not pay a lot of attention to because it was in Africa. But then again, when we had COVID, look what happened. We did have a readiness that some lauded. We can obviously do better, and something that you have said, Chibuzo, is that this is probably the first of many. The the
Unfortunately,
ice caps are melting, people. The
plastic
diseases
use,
from before
plastic use is added
are
to it.
waking up. So there. And a real quick Lakanle, we've got less than a minute. Let me hear your thoughts on this one. In from the Punch newspaper, medical tourism gobbed $6.23 million in 8 months, according to a report obtained from the Central Bank of Nigeria. But more also interestingly in this story is the talk of pharmacists and stakeholders in that industry lamenting poor access to forex for the importation and manufacturing of essential medicines.
What a shame. Just 1 year after, in the same 8 month period, Nigerians have spent about $5 million more than they spent in 2021. And if we look at it, um, we look at it, the picture is not looking good, and we need to do something drastic. Imagine that we spend this 2.3 million dollars on our public health system in Nigeria, even if it's just to pay the salaries of the doctors and to keep them here rather than lose them to other countries that we train them virtually for free, and we're losing them just like that to other places, even if it's just to pay them a living wage to keep them here. I mean, I hear 2 weeks ago that Lut is the only one that has a working MRI in all the public hospitals in Nigeria.
My goodness.
So it's let's just end it.
Okay, let's take some of your messages. I'll take this one, Gilbert from Festac, saying on the indiscriminate dumping of plastic bags in our environment. Like Chibuzo said, we need to orientate and educate people on the danger of this act. Also, we need disposable bins at strategic places. Phasing out of plastic bags should be in phases so we don't throw people out of work. We need to create alternative jobs for people currently working in the plastic industry in the long term. And Arthur Anthony yeah, Arthur, that's not with anything to do with Firstly Pressed. Um, Dami from Ikorodu says, how much of the money on medical tourism was spent by the residents of Aso and Portland Avenue? Questions. While also Matthias from Agro says, the actions or inactions of some officers should not necessarily define the whole of the Nigerian military. That is absurd. These crimes can be investigated and culprits tried. All right, and we end the show. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Chibuzo, Lakunle, you can find at Lakunle70 underscore. Yeah, at Lakunle70. And Chibuzo, where can we find you on social media?
So you can find me on Chimanu2000, CHIMENU 2000 at Gmail, everywhere, Twitter. That's how you find me.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. Um, First show, first freshly pressed down in your belts.
Good.
All right.
Good.
Great to have you on board.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you so much for joining us and sending your messages. And for those who sent messages and I couldn't read out due to time constraints, my sincere apologies. I always strive to read out as many messages as I can, and I will continue to do that going forward. Join me 8:15 for, or stay tuned because coming up at 8:15 actually, we've got entertainment inside the grapevine, and I'll be playing you some music to tide you over. Till then.
The headlines.